the terrible economic impact that the pandemic has had and the influence that the writing and activism of Michael Harrington has had in bringing democratic socialism into my political perspective along with feminism. Another person I want to mention in this regard is Gary Alperovitz. I don't have the names of his books at hand, but if you Google him, I'm going to try to bring him up.
I can't quite get
again.
that name.
Yeah, I'm going to get the name for you in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, so he's a historian. His first name is spelled G-A-R.
G-A-R.
And his second name is A-L-P-E-R. A-L-P-E-R-O-V-I-T-Z, as in zebra.
Got it, I think. Gar Alperovitz. I'll put that in the
actually, I can tell you some of his books that I think are very important in the context of understanding the economic dilemmas that the United States and really the world need to overcome if we're going to ever have the beloved community envisioned by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, one of which is America Beyond Capitalism. Another is What Then Must We Do?
Sounds good, thank you.
He also has a website, and I'm going to that has a wealth of information on it. And the website comes from his name, GARALPEROVITZ.org, where he lays out the principles of what he calls a pluralist commonwealth, a multiracial democracy. In terms of democratic socialism, I think that a political economy perspective is very important because we usually think of politics and economics as separate realms, but they're not. And I think that's one of the factors that got us into this mess, otherwise known as neoliberal capitalism, because the economic policies that we have always have an impact on our politics. The political policies that we have always have an impact on our economics. I would say that's another validation of an intersectional approach to looking at problems and policy. And what he has done is he and his colleagues have created small-scale, ecologically sustainable, cooperative economic enterprises that are much more democratic than the corporate capitalist model. And that provides a way forward, in my view, towards democratic socialism.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just looking him up, and he has this movie too, The Next American Revolution, Beyond Corporate Capitalism and State Socialism. And it was like, wow,
right.
That's amazing.
Right. And that's important because the state socialist model that the former Soviet Union had, in my opinion, was not a sustainable model and is not a good model for democratic socialism in the United States. And I think it's important for contemporary democratic socialists to say that what we have in mind is not what they had in the Soviet dictatorship. In fact, what we're talking about is the opposite of that, because it's very democratic and it's decentralized. And of course, one of the ways that the political right holds up positive economic and social change is through red baiting. Is through saying that someone like me wants the model that the former Soviet Union used, and nothing can be further from the truth. In fact, one of the reasons why I would never want that is because that was basically a Stalinist model, and Stalin was horribly anti-Semitic. And so that's the furthest thing from my mind.
Indeed, that's the opposite. My grandfather was actually in the Soviet Union for a while. He went there from Poland in 1939, and he was a forced laborer during his time there.
Right.
So it is
Right.
literally one of the worst models after
Absolutely.
Nazism, maybe the worst model that one could recommend for. So that's also, and I think it's like when one's trying to develop political change, it's both to obviously make it clear that you don't want it, but also the things that you propose should and are generally fundamentally different. Like if you're saying we should build from the ground up cooperatives and things that are actually ran by the people rather than the government controls everything and says they're doing it for the people but just do it for themselves, then that's like it gets to be, I mean, the thing is, anyone can say, oh, I want to do this, give me all the power, I promise I won't be Stalin, but that's not any good, because if they have all the power, they can just go and do it. But if you build a system of widely distributed power, then you can actually be confident, even if someone wants to be Stalin, they can't do it.
Right. The last thing that the contemporary left needs is another cult of personality.
Indeed.
That will take us down a very destructive and dangerous road. And I worry about that. And in fact, in terms of books that I would suggest to your listeners, I think that a very important book for our era is a book that was written by a psychologist named Erich Fromm, a secular Jewish psychologist and Marxist. A lot of people don't know that he was a Marxist humanist, but he was. And it's a book called Escape from Freedom.
Oh yeah, that one is so good.
Right? Because he makes the point that freedom is sometimes frightening to people. And if they get too frightened by it, they try to escape from it into the kind of cult of personality that Joseph Stalin had. And I would argue that the Republican Party is currently entrapped in a form of fascist cult of personality because of their continued allegiance to Donald Trump. And it's very dangerous because it leads to Marjorie Taylor Greene having these crazy anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jewish space lasers. It leads to the ongoing crazy idea that Biden stole the election, which enables all the racist voter suppression initiatives that have been proposed by various Republican legislatures and governors.
Yeah, it enables to such a degree. We were literally having some of these legislators literally saying we should just throw out, like millions of people voted, we should literally just throw it out, some of them were saying, and we should have the president we didn't vote for rather than the one we did back. And I mean, that's not what, I don't think there was that many people who want that, but some of the ones who want it are quite powerful, so it's definitely. And I also want to very heartily second your point about red baiting. I mean, I've been doing this class on Latin American social history, and the amount of red baiting and the consequences of it, it's really, I mean, we were learning in Guatemala, they did genocide against the indigenous Maya people, and largely on the basis of, everybody who's not us are communists, because they were like,
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
they would say everybody's a communist, so therefore, in order to not have a communist dictatorship, we have to kill all of you, which kind of defeats the point of not having a dictatorship that kills everybody if you become a dictatorship and kill everybody. But they were really using it. It was effective enough that a lot of, up to our Ronald Reagan and our government over here, were aligned with the government that was doing that, because they were like, this is against communism, so it must be, even though the invocation of communism to justify murdering innocent people should be obviously ridiculous. But people were so, I don't know people were so caught up, I guess, in the fear and in the demonization, and some people were just looking for an excuse for their hatred.
Well,
and their
we certainly saw that on January 6th when there was the insurrection at the Capitol building, that these are people who are caught up in fear of anyone who's different from how they look, how they are, who come from different cultures, different nationalities. And because their fear was driven through a cult of personality around Donald Trump, it led them down a very dangerous road towards fascism and an attempted coup. And I think that speaks to the gravity of the issues that we're facing. Because democracy has to be nurtured. If democracy isn't nurtured, and if we don't have a vision for a multi-racial social democracy, it's very easy for the forces of reaction and fascism to attempt to destroy American democracy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, that's true. Very true. Let's see. Zooming in a bit, what advice do you have for our students on navigating academia? And also, after we graduate, what advice do you have on navigating this economic system and finding some work which is meaningful and good for society and treats us decently?
So, I think one thing to keep in mind, this is almost a cliche, but I think it will have a profound impact on the kind of economy that you'll be entering, is that the world of work is in crisis and is in a stage of transformation. Andrew Yang, who is currently running for mayor of New York, is one of my least favorite candidates because of, I think, gaps in understanding that he has about the politics of race and class in New York. But there is one thing that he knows about. He knows about the rapid pace of technological change and how that's accelerating, and how a lot of jobs that were considered steady and secure jobs in the past are going away, and they're not coming back. I thought about this question ahead of time when you sent me your list of questions. And one thing that I would encourage college students to do now, if they can, is to create forms of material evidence now that are viable in different types of job sectors that are evidence of what they can do. For example, when I was an undergraduate at SUNY Oswego and then later at Brooklyn College, at SUNY Oswego, I wrote one article. I wrote an article about